Okay, good evening, everyone. We're going to call this meeting to order. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Ritchie and Coughlin. That the regular meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of May 2nd, 2018 come to order at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? Carried. And I'd ask you to stand if you're able while we sing the national anthem and remain standing after we're complete at the national anthem.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot, in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Please remain standing for a moment and for private reflection and private prayer. And also let's kind of pause and reflect on the victims of the van attack in Toronto last week. That's why our flags are flying at half-mast. So let's remember their families in our prayers and thoughts. Please be seated. And I'll turn to council and just ask, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest on any of the matters on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, if something does pop up, just mention it at that time. We'll make a note of it. So we have a presentation tonight, and it's from Waypoint. And so I invite Carol Lambie and David Jeffrey to come forward. Just take the mics and try and pull them towards you, because we do stream these meetings, and I'm sure you have lots of jewels of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience and along with sharing with us. So please just introduce yourself for the clerk. I think she has your information, but just for the record, for the people that might be viewing us at home.
Good evening, Your Worship, Mayor French, and members of council. Thank you so much for providing us the opportunity this evening. My name is Carol Lambie, and I'm the President and CEO at Waypoint Center for Mental Health Care, and with me is my partner.
So I'm David Jeffrey. I'm the Executive Director of the Chickamuck Community Health Center. Bonjour, we're bilingual as well. Thank you for this opportunity.
So we're very pleased to be able to share with you an update on, let's see if I get this going in the right direction.
The right side of it?
Yeah, there we go. An update on a project that we are working on together, which is a health hub in Midland. And the first slide actually talks about the vision that we have in terms of being able to provide together two different organizations a range of healthcare services that will address people's both physical and mental health needs. And we are very pleased to be able to have this service located very close to downtown Midland, which will provide so much access to our patients and clients. So the current services from Chickamuck Community Health Center, as well as Waypoint's 2 locations in Midland, are outpatient services and what we call our Hero Center, which is housing, employment, rehabilitation, and our peer support areas, will be moving into this new building. Again, the location provides for proximity to downtown. Many of the other services that are downtown and area shops and businesses for both our staff and the clients that we're going to serve. Co-locating our two organizations and these particular programs gives us a great opportunity as well to share resources, be more efficient, and reduce duplication. We're very pleased as well that the town is a partner with us and is providing the property under a long-term lease arrangement. Another thank you, of course, has to be to the Simcoe County. We are a member of the Simcoe County Hospital Alliance, and as you know, Simcoe County provides annual capital funding to the hospitals in Simcoe County, and a portion of that will be used to support this project. David's going to talk to you about more of the specifics of this project, but certainly as we've come along, we have gathered feedback from community, other partners, our clients themselves, and various public meetings, and have incorporated that into the planning that we have done.
So I will use the pointer when we get to some slides here. So the site work and construction is underway. We're actually well into the footings complete and the steel starting. We worked through the approval process with the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. We're about to get into the design stage to kind of scope out the internal spacing, room spacing, numbers, how many, how large rooms would be. And there'll be many rooms shared in common with the Waypoint programs. We're looking towards occupancy for December, although the way we're working the details through with the ministry, that might be later. We're taking a construction management approach right now, which allows us to tender into many local agents, contractors in the region. So that's actually very good news for the local economy. We have lots of input from our various user groups, the various programs that will go into the space in terms of making the design workable in terms of the delivery of the programs that we put out for the community. We're working through, we're thinking of the partnership as a 50-50, and we will have an operational committee, so to speak, between the two agencies that will look after the ongoing operations for the building for the next 49 years, which is the length of the land lease with the town. There are some recent milestones. So we had a construction manager appointed this past August, this past August in 17. The site plan was approved in principle in October. We got our first building permit from the town in December. Site excavation began in December, so they've been doing the footings through the winter, and it's quite a marvel to watch how they do that and make it work. Preliminary construction underway. As I mentioned, local and regional businesses and trades are involved in various stages of the tendering and delivery of the construction process, and lots of contribution to the local economy as a result. We're on a bit of a road trip, Carol and I, to the councils we think are most relevant to us or close to the center. And of course, you folks, we have plenty of clients that come up from the Springwater Township into our area to seek services. So we wanted to let you know. So Midland, Penetang, Tay-Tiny, and of course Springwater. And we did have a bit of a deputation at the County of Simcoe as well. We are, on May 7th, there will be an open house at Chigamit Community Health Center. The drawings will be up. The architect will be there, the construction manager, the project manager who's here behind us, Bob Savage, will be present. So if you have folks that are interested in seeing what this will look like, by all means, please drop in. There's an invitation. The last slide's the actual invitation to that. The site itself is set up for kind of regular photo taking from the construction trailer. So there's a snapshot kind of every half hour, and that gets kind of logged into a repository and then mounted into our website so people can watch what's happening and what it looks like. So for instance, back in January, this is the excavation starting, and they found a lot of sand, not much mud, which is kind of good news for the work site. By February, you're starting to see some of the form work occurring. Not a lot of snow. If you remember, February didn't have a lot of snow. That came later, March. But form work continuing, more difficult in March because the weather was so variable, as you recall. And then this is a rendering from a winter scene. It'll be a 2-story building. It'll be about 40,000 square feet, roughly, again, 50-50 between the two agencies. The lake is over in this direction, so this is Bayshore Drive going east and west, with parking coming up and around and back behind the building. This building's on the edge of Edge Hill Park, no pun intended. The section of the park is called The Grove, so it's in the downtown side of that park, about 2.7 acres. And then there's a summer rendering, which also captures the invite. And you can see the cladding on the building. We're intending to try and marry the look and feel of the building with the park around. So the kind of forest feeling. So the cladding is all wood grain with a plastic composite seal to protect it over the lifetime of the building. So that's our presentation. So welcome any questions if you have any.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that information, and we have been following along. So I turn to Council. Councilor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mayor French, and thank you for coming. I'm Springwater, and I'm up in the Elmville area, so yes, there's a lot of people who go up to the Midland area there for health services. Is this Chitimac, is that like a walk-in health center, or could you just
Sure.
expand on that,
So
please?
a community health center, there are 75 in the province. We're a primary care organization and a community development organization put together into one strategy, if you could say it that way. So we do health promotion, we do many, many program pieces for the entire community. Then we have a roster of clients who are with our primary care team. So we have 2 physicians, 3 nurse practitioners, some RNs, and so on.
Do you get funding from the LHINs?
All of our funding comes from the LHIN.
Okay. And is there doctors involved there? or
Yes,
all
we have
nurses?
2 physicians and 3 nurse practitioners.
Thank you, thank
Yeah.
you.
So we're not precisely a walk-in for primary care. You need to roster with
You have
us.
to roster.
Yeah,
Good, that's good news, thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
Other questions? Councilor Austin?
Thank you, Mayor French, and thank you for your presentation. Is there funding for transportation for patients who come from out of town and have and don't have their own transportation?
So that question could have a long, complicated answer, but let me put it to you this way. We work closely with Community Link, which is a transportation organization in Midland, who support transportation needs for those who need it in Penetang, Midland, Tay, and Tiny, and probably Springwater and Northern Essas, if I got that right. So we don't have funding directly. We do support some clients with some bus and cab fare as they absolutely need it, but we work in partnership with Community Link to try to provide that service.
We also, if I could add to that, we also, Waypoint had for many years run a transportation service, which is very unusual for a hospital to do. But we wanted to support the partnership between Midland and Penetanguishene in terms of getting the bus service up and running. And so we do try to support that and encourage our patients and clients to use it. And we would be having conversations to make sure that we're on that bus route. And then we'll continue as they're working with the county to see how far that transportation framework can be extended. So.
Follow-up?
You mentioned a number of rooms. They're for just day visits, or they're not for patient accommodation, are they?
No, there's no
Office.
beds, no overnight stays. It's all ambulatory daycare. We have open some evenings. We'll probably be open on part of some weekends as well. So we have extended hours, but there's no overnight stays, no. Yep.
Yeah, and the 2 Waypoint programs that are going there are strictly outpatient programs, yep, so no inpatient care.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that information. That's great to bring us up to date, and obviously there's a growing need for various services for healthcare in the northern section of the county. And picking up in the transportation, I would assume that the county connector system that they're putting into place starting as early as this fall would at least be able to transport some of the patients even from the Elmvale area up. And of course the county's going to take over the town transportation, Penetang Midland, so there may be more opportunity for transportation for those in need.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Good.
thank you for that presentation. So can I have a mover and a seconder to receive this information? Richie and Austin.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council.
Thank you. That the delegation from Waypoint Center and Chicamac Community Health Center for mental health care be received. All those in favor? Carried. Previous minutes, can I have a mover and a seconder? Hannah and Coghlan. That the minutes of the council items 6.2 through to 6.3 be approved as presented. Any questions on these minutes? Councilor Hannah.
Thank you, Mayor French. Excuse me, 6.3, special meeting of council to do with council numeration. And my point being is that that was a special meeting of council, and I would request that future meetings that we have to discuss the benefits entitled to council in the future be a part of our regular council meetings, so they're not perceived as being something that we're trying to keep away from the public. I think it's important for the public and the taxpayers to understand what some members of council may want them to pay for in the future.
Here, just go to acting CEO, I was going to say Brinley, it's Schmidt. Yeah, and would that be appropriate? I understand that a special session, so we fully understood kind of the ramifications of the kind of the changes and kind of tax remuneration and that type of thing. So would the expectation be that this would be part of a regular council meeting when you do present the options? Because obviously we're all providing input, and that does make some sense. Would that be your plan? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, to Councillor Hannah. That is the game plan. The reason why we took the opportunity on April 23rd to have a session which was open to the public was really just to provide more of a framework, if you will, for members of council to understand what the current scenarios are, and also provide some options and have some dialogue, and not necessarily take up 2 or 3 hours of a regular council meeting. But now that we have some input, we will be coming back into a regular council format, if you will, with recommendations likely by the end of June.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Minutes of boards, committees, and organizations. You have a mover and a seconder for that. Allen and Coghlan. That the minutes of boards, committees, and other organizations, item 6.5, be received as information. Any questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Now we have question period, where we invite anybody in the audience to come forward, and we prefer questions regarding something on the agenda, but you're welcome to pose any question. And if we can't provide an answer, we will get it for you to the best of our ability. So the floor is open, and if you do have a question of council, this is your opportunity. Guess all's good in Springwater tonight, so thank you. So let's move on to correspondence, and can I have a mover and a seconder to get it on the table? Hannah and Coghlan. That correspondence and information items 8.2 through to 8.5 be received as information. Any questions on any of this that anybody would like to comment on? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. And action item, if you're following the agenda, 9.1, it has been withdrawn because our CAO has the information on that, so it will be brought up at probably the next meeting. So it has been withdrawn. So we'll move on to 9.2, action report on Cameron Estates. Can I have a mover and a seconder to get this on the table? McConkey, Coghlan. The report from the Director of Planning Services and Bylaw Enforcement regarding sign bylaw. Oops. So, okay. That the report from the planner regarding the road allowance transfer as part of SU-201-001 Cameron Estates dated May 2nd, 2018 be received, and that the process to stop up and close the portion of an unopened road allowance between concession 7 and 8 be initiated, and that the requirements for giving of notice be satisfied, that the draft bylaw be introduced for review and consideration. So, questions on this? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. So action item 9.3, the R-zone policy. Can I have a mover and a seconder to get this on the table? Richie and Alan. The report from the Director of Recreation, Parks, and Properties regarding the R-zone policy dated April 18, 2018 be received, that the policy and procedures identified in the R-zone policy be approved. Turn to council for questions of our Director. Councilor Hanna.
Thank you, Mayor French. I remember reading the draft, and I went through this again, and unless I missed it, but it applies to volunteers, staff, and so on. I didn't notice council being identified in this bylaw. Did I miss it, or is council identified in it or not?
I'll go to Director Belcour first.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Hanna. I don't believe it specifically identifies council, but what it does identify is any inappropriate behavior between any two parties within a municipal facility. So that would include council. It could be patron to patron, patron to staff, etc. So it's about promoting appropriate behavior on municipal properties and in municipal facilities.
Councilor Hanna.
Thank you. I know we're all really popular, but I just thought maybe it was an oversight that we should have included members of council, but I'll leave it up to the rest of them.
Okay, any other questions on this policy? Councilor Hanna?
I just have to comment, because if people have read stuff in the past, know there was a gentleman once that wrote that I was born to have my throat slit and be hung, so I just thought maybe that was something that should be considered for the future.
Okay, thank you. With that in mind, all those in favor? Carried. Action item 9.4, the Park Open Space Classification System. Can I have a mover and a seconder to get this on the table? Allen and McConkey. That the report from the Director of Recreation, Parks, and Properties regarding the Park Open Space Classification System dated May 2nd, 2018 be received. The recommendation 66 in the draft Recreation Master Plan update be approved, and that the action plan developed by council be amended to include the 4-tier park open space classification system and planning guidelines. So I turn to council for questions of Director Belcour. Councilor McConkey.
I have talked to Director Belcour and mentioned that it would be nice in the future for a reference sort of on our website, that if we do a chart with the different categories and the definitions, and then put all the parks' names under the columns, the 4 columns or something. It just is a quick glance, and it will just remind people then what they can expect in the parks that are in their area. So thank you.
As a follow-up, Director Belcour, is there any reason when we complete this we couldn't put a simple chart like that in? Because we do have a lot of charts, or a lot of parks around an open space around the township, and it might be an appropriate piece of information that newcomers would enjoy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, we can follow up on that. It would be fairly simple to amend the actual inventory document. that's attached to this report to post as a, as a parkland inventory on our website. So, and we can do it by ward, by classification, et cetera. So, yeah, we can follow up on that.
Yeah, I think we're just discussing a simple table. You can do a quick reference and probably is appropriate because the plan is finally kind of being locked in place. It'd be nice to have that information available. Any other questions? Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mayor French. Through you to Director Belcourt. Could you remind me what tableland means?
Director Belcourt.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Austin. Tableland references usable surface. For example, if we have a park that is very hilly, has wetlands, et cetera, off to the side, only the flat or relatively flat usable land would be classed as tableland.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All those in favor? Carried. Moving on to 9.5, Recreation Master Plan Update. A mover and a second to get this on the table. Coghlan and Allen. The report from the Director of Recreation Parks and Properties regarding the Parks and Recreation Master Plan Update dated May 2nd, 2018 be received, and that the Parks and Recreation Master Plan Update be approved and implemented in accordance with the action plan as developed by Council. Questions of Director Belcourt? I think we spent a lot of time on the Master Rec Plan, which I think is good, because I think we all understand it fully, and obviously have kind of provided some direction of where we're going, and I think that's important. So maybe we don't have any more questions, but if you do, I'd ask you to pose them now. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. 9.6 action report, Homer Barrett Park splash pad. A mover and a second to get it on the table. Coghlan and Austin. Then the report from the Director of Recreation Parks and Properties regarding the Homer Barrett Park splash pad dated May 2nd, 2018 be received, that the contract for the design, supply, and construction services for project 2023-12 Hornet Barrett Park Splash Pad be awarded to Diamond Head Sprinklers, Inc. in the amount of $298,800 plus taxes. So open the floor for questions or comments. Councilor McConkey.
This is great to get the splash pad going. I guess in future, I just hope that council sort of respects. I know that if the residents want facilities or different additional things in association with the splash pad, because most people do not want, the parents watching will not want to sit out in the sun, and there's going to have to be something over their head, and it's going to progress into more. And just make sure that they are aware that part of this will be coming from community funding, because I don't even know how much is DC eligible if we go into that, but this council will have to think about that going into it, whether we're putting into the DC plan, or if it's not, then they have to fundraise for all of it, if it can't be DC funded. So just like the other communities, but we've given them a good start, and there is other things that I think need to go with it to be also, like, you just don't put them out there in the sun and play and don't have a place to get some shade.
Director Belcourt.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor McConkey, there is a sun shelter, shade shelter included in this proposal, along with accessible seating area, in addition to the existing picnic shelter that's already located in this facility.
Deputy Mayor Allen.
That was the point I was going to make. It's bulleted in the report there that there's a 256 square foot shelter as part of this.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mayor French. I don't have a question, just a comment. I'm very pleased to hear that this project is going to, most likely, if we pass it, going to a local builder. that's very good news. That's a bonus for sure.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, Mayor French. As everybody knows, I did not support this at budget time because I felt we did not have adequate financial information. I think what we've got here is appropriate. The only thing that was missing in the report, and I spoke to the director about it, and he told me to go to the appendix, I'd find it, and that's the annual cost of operating this system that we're, excuse me, that's before council tonight at $298,000, and in the appendix it says it's $31,588, and I'm mentioning that so people at home will know we did our homework and we know what the annual cost of operating the splash pad will be.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. This is just, I guess, for my own clarity, just the understanding that if this is approved by council tonight, the approved budget would be, the entire portion would be paid for by the municipality. I just want to make sure that there's no misunderstanding at council, and if so, if council is asking for a community to fundraise a portion of it, I think that we need to identify that to allow them an opportunity to do so.
I will go to Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Coghlan. So the 2018 capital budget includes an amount of $350,000 for this project, of which 90% is DC eligible, and the remaining 10% is through a Parkland Reserve Fund. So no community funding at this point, unless directed otherwise.
Deputy Mayor Allen?
Through you, Mayor French. What is the anticipated start and completion date for this, please?
Director Belcourt?
Thank you, Worship. If I may defer, the president of Diamond Head Sprinkler, Inc. is sitting in the audience here, and he's better equipped to advise on a potential start date and completion date.
So why don't you come forward and take a seat here and update it, and we'll hold you to it, and those thousands of people watching this webcast, and I'm sure everybody in Elmville is watching this evening, they're going to hold you to it. Name for the clerk, please.
Thank you. As Ron mentioned, Kent Fay from Diamond Head Sprinklers. The anticipated schedule in the original tender was completion for July 31st. There possibly was some delays in the awarding of the contract, so but as our schedule is laid out today, we could start immediately and there would be no jeopardy to the July 31st completion deadline.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McConkey.
I just have a couple questions. I remember when the splash pad came forward, there was many residents really wanting this and willing to contribute. And so to hear that, then I also have the same issue. We have the Midhurst Pavilion. Residents came, they're willing to participate. So we came up with, I thought, a bylaw or an understanding that if projects were DC funded, whatever part that was not DC funded would be a contribution from the residents. I just don't see a similarity here because this is coming from Parkland Reserve, the remaining, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe the Midhurst Pavilion is done that way. So I just want to make sure that we're fair throughout the community when we do these projects. So I don't know if I can vote for it tonight if it's not the 10%.
Maybe I'll go to Director Schmidt on comment on funding.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor McConkey. So I guess for this particular project, it was debated, I guess, if you will, at budget time, and the final approval was, as I mentioned, 90% DC and 10% Parkland Reserve Fund. I guess on the notion that when we brought this report back tonight, there could be additional conversation about that, and absolutely there could be. I think, in my personal opinion, is that Homer Barrett Park is more of a community park. It's not there's no community center there per se, whereas in Midhurst it is a community, I guess. There was some direct request from the community to have and to push forward with the Midhurst Pavilion, and I guess council made the decision at that time to the only way it would go forward is to have some community funding. I guess Again, it's subject to council direction. If fundraising is something that you want to consider, now would be the time to have that conversation.
Okay. Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, Mayor French. And I think Councilor McConkey brings up a very sensitive issue. We've got two different communities. One has to fundraise for their portion to get a pavilion where the other community doesn't. And I don't want to be the source of generating any animosity between communities. So I think this council has to think seriously here that we treat everybody equally. And I think not asking the community or the receiving the splash pad to fundraise as Midhurst has had to do. In fact, when there was debate about the pavilion, there was people at this table that questioned why Midhurst should get a pavilion, where it was being located, and we even had questions from people from RAC that come here and talk about the fundraise and talk about how Grenfell had a fundraise up in advance for their pavilion and so on. And for Midhurst to get a pavilion, they had to commit to fundraising. So as I say, I think you have to treat everybody equally, and if we don't, I'm like Councillor McConkey, I'm not supporting this, not because I don't think the splash pad should happen. We've got the financial information now that I asked for, but I think how we're going to fund it has to be the same throughout the township.
Councillor McConkey?
Yeah, again, I don't want to, I'm thrilled that there's going to be a splash pad there. I think we all look at it as a great pilot project. But I did see many residents out here wanting it the same way as Midhurst, enthusiastic to fundraise. So I don't think it's a lot to go back and ask for them to raise 10% of the $300,000. Also in the Snow Valley with the tennis courts and that's the same thing. There's a 10% allocation that they have to fundraise for. So I'll stay with where I believe that when something's coming from DCs, the remaining part of the DCs, the 10%, is community funded. So I have to support that throughout all communities.
Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. I think that the conversation I recall was that the community of Elmville, this service is more than just Elmville, as my first point. Secondly, the community of Elmville has just surpassed a fundraising goal of $200,000 to create an indoor recreation facility for the community. I think that asking them to go out again to fundraise for something that I believe is the responsibility of this council. This is something new. This is not an addition. This isn't another splash pad. This is a splash pad that will service the entire municipality, not just the community of Elmville. I do also recall that we had talked about having the additional 10% withdrawn from the Hydro Reserve Fund at one point, because those funds were specific to Elmville. And I think that alleviated members of council that money can only be spent there, and that might be better to leave the parkland dedication to something else. I will continue to support the entire amount being paid for by the municipality through DCs and whichever fund for the remaining 10%. I do think that this service is far more than the one community that would be tasked with fundraising this.
I guess, Councillor Austin?
Thank you, Mayor French. I respect the statements and opinions made by Councillors Han and McConkey, but I would like to point out that now is not the time to be deciding on how the splash pad should be paid for. That decision was made back when we passed the budget at the end of 2017. We made that decision then to go back and change that decision. I think is not the appropriate approach. I agree as well with Councillor Coghlan that we could look at taking some money from the hydro fund, but to hold this project up because it should be paid for partly by fundraising. As I say, that decision should have been made at budget time. We didn't make it then, so we should be moving forward with what we did decide at this point.
I'm going to go to Director Schmidt before I make my comments. I'm not sure we concluded all the funding at our budget meeting, did we?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to members of council. So when we did the capital budget, it was proposed, as I mentioned tonight, that 90% would come from development charges and 10% would come from Parkland Reserve Fund. That's how the 2018 capital budget was approved. Just one further note, though, just to make sure we're all on the same page, there was conversation about the Midhurst Pavilion. The Midhurst Pavilion is not 90%. It is 90% DC, but the 10% is split. So of that 10%, a portion or 5% is community fundraising and 5% is through the township. So we're not even, there's no set policy even in regards to that, if you will. So just to clarify on that.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mayor French. I'd just like to switch gears here for a minute and ask, I'm sure it is, but there's a sewer line that's supposed to go through there to that back subdivision the back subdivision. Thank you, Mayor French, you're right, Elmville Meadows. So I hope we're not laying in the path of this. Like, we can't go around, we're gonna go straight through. So I'm sure it's been taken into consideration, but I'm just mentioning it. So if I could just feel comfortable, that'd be nice, thanks.
And maybe Director Belcourt or Director Coleman, because I know there are plans for the kind of sewage or whatever. It's not going to interfere with this exercise. Maybe Director Belcourt, if you have the answer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Ritchie. Yeah, the splash pad will be positioned as not to interfere with the proposed sewer line from the Green Meadows subdivision. I've met several times on site with their engineers to lay out the path, and we will be avoiding, the two won't conflict.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you, Mayor French. I don't want to get off, but while I'm asking about, is that sewer line going to go in this year? Can I get a quick yes or no? Just comforted, no. Or maybe Director Coleman could tell us that.
Director Coleman.
Thank you, Mayor French, through you to Councillor Ritchie. At this point, most of the outstanding items that need to be rectified are in the hands of the developer and their consultants, so unfortunately, I can't provide a yes or a no.
Thank you, Mayor French. I didn't want to get off, but thanks for answering that. Thank you.
Councillor McConkey.
Well, I guess the motion sets, but I know that there was talk of the 5%. So if at any state, I believe that there should be some type of contribution or fundraising at a certain percent. It's just not fair when you have two other projects going on right now that haven't also been implemented, and they have a percentage that they have to fund for. So I cannot face my residents and support this. I think that when we approach a budget, we always have discussions about where we think it can come from and that, but we're always told by staff, it's never approved, it's never final till it comes to council. And I think that's what we have here tonight. And so I'd like you to respect my residents when you make your decision.
Councillor Hanna.
Thank you, and excuse me, I don't like to disagree with our Director of Finance, but I recall at budget time, there was a number of discussions how it was going to be funded, and it wasn't, in my mind, it wasn't clear that this was all going to be paid for by taxpayers' dollars, what wasn't covered by development charges. And if there's people on this council that are suggesting that one community should be treated different than the other, then I think we need to make it clear and identify those people, because we're all elected to support all the residents of Springwater Township, not just one area. One community has to fundraise. Sandy McConkey's community has to fundraise. And if the splash pad, which I'm supporting because the finances is here, but I'm not supporting them not having to fundraise in Elmville for their splash pad when other communities have to fundraise. It's only 5% of what's not covered by the 90% that's DC eligible. So I think it's not unreasonable. As Councillor Colgan pointed out, there's money in the hydro fund that can't be used anyplace else other than Elmville. That would resolve the whole issue, and the rest of the township shouldn't feel disadvantaged because they had a fundraise while one community didn't.
Okay, I'm going to let everybody go once more. I'm not going to stay here all night. Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you, Mayor French. I think that for myself, this is more than a pavilion, and I understand that price tags can dictate, but to me, this is a park that services our entire municipality, and there is no us in them in this discussion. This is a great thing for Springwater Township as a whole, and it should be paid for Springwater Township as a whole. This is not going to be placed on one community. I do know that Elmvale themselves fundraise for their boards for their rinks just as community donations. The pavilions are treated the same, and I will agree with you on that. This is not a pavilion. This is something that will service the entire community. I know that when we are going to be doing a recplex, and yes, there's for some reason still a north and south in the minds of some people, but to me, Springwater is one, and I don't think that when we build a recplex in the south, it should be mandated that the community members that live in the south fundraise towards it. This is a benefit to the members of the north part of our community as well. Items or projects like this service the entire municipality, and we are geographically large. And yes, some people are going to utilize it more than others based on location, but we needed to pick a location, and this was, in my opinion, the best one with the downtown, and I'm fully supportive of this, and I would ask council to remain the way that it is and not place a fundraising portion on the community.
Deputy Mayor Allen?
Through you, Mayor French. Director Schmidt, what was your understanding when we finalized the budget with respect to this financing aspect? Was it settled, and therefore we were coming forward tonight just to verify that the costs of the contract were coming in line? Or did you think that any element of the financing was outstanding? To be determined.
Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Deputy Mayor Allen. I won't even speak directly to this project, just in general terms. Whenever the budget is approved, it's approved in principle so that projects can move forward. And then, based on our procurement bylaw, depending on the dollar amount of the actual project, we're required to report back to council and seek recommendations and/or approval. So, at any point in time, council can make a decision either to proceed with a project or not. Just because we got budget approval essentially allows staff to begin the process of working on the project, but then we have an obligation to report back to council. And in this particular case, say the project was over budget, well, council could still make the decision as to whether they wanted to proceed or not, and we would have to find a funding source. At any point in time, council could take a look at the funding sources and make other proposals if they wish. So I guess with the budget, the way it was approved, that's what was set in stone at that stage. Doesn't mean that council can't make an amendment to that at any time.
Follow up?
So the 10% then was per the budget was coming from what fund again?
From the Parkland Reserve Fund.
Parkland Reserve Fund. But if we replace that with the Hydro Reserve Fund, then there is sufficient in that, obviously, so one could replace the other.
That's correct.
I just think at this late stage, to be reopening it and talking about whether this should be funded by a 50-50 split or whether we should continue to fund it, whether it's from one reserve or the other, is what we should be considering tonight. So,
Any other final comments? Because I'd like to make some. Okay, it was my understanding the final funding was subject to discussion. Every one of the ladies I spoke to out in there, they were quite willing to fund 10% of this cost. And so I'm not sure how we got to where we are, because that was my understanding. I made it clear the night of the council, I will support it based on that the community contributes to it, because one thing that is different about the splash pad that is the operating costs of a splash pad are much more substantial than a pavilion. And that's coming from effectively all the taxpayers of the township, because they're going to use it. So I have no problem with that particular issue. But that was my understanding, so I'm a little confused. It was my understanding that the last 10%, yes, it could be from the reserve, from the hydro fund, or the community was going to belly up and raise, well, $30,000 for the sake of argument. That was my understanding, and I'm not sure how I got to that understanding when we had the meeting here, because I made it very clear, and we can play the tape if you like. That was the basis of it, of my support of it. So that's all I can say on it. Councilor McConkey.
So if we take the 30,000, divide in half, it's 15, so we could do similar to Midhurst at that, if it's not the 10%, that's a compromise too. I just think that, yes, they came forward twice on this initiative. They're very powerful, they wanted it same, how many times did we hear from the Midhurst people? And it's great, so we always want a little bit of a stake in the ground from them, and I know that eventually, I don't believe, I know that you said that many residents are going to come up and this is going to be the splash pad for everyone. Well, there's also a splash pad designated for the south end with the growth. So the similar thing, it's going to happen like when we look at a certain percentage. So I just, I still stand with the 3 projects going on, and with one not having any funding from the residents, I can't support it, and I'll leave it.
I guess, okay. Councillor Austin?
Thank you, Mayor French. Item 9.5 on the agenda is asking us simply to award the contract. What I think perhaps we should do is defer the actual amount, like how much is going to be paid for by taxpayers in general, and how much, we might ask the residents to do. That kind of report or issue might come at a later date. I think it would be a good idea to move ahead with a contract right now, and then fine-tune how the whole amount is paid for at our next meeting with a new report.
I don't think that's good fiscal management, saying I'm going to buy the car, but I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. So quite honestly, I will support it if the funding is taken out of the hydro fund. Because it was my understanding, and they can say, well, that wasn't their understanding. My understanding was they were going to pay 10% of this. It was never an issue. This has been an issue of getting a splash pad in Elmville since 2010. And at that time, they were willing to fund half of it, to get it going. And of course, things have changed, and we have the high school funding in that. And Director Schmidt made a very good point when I had a discussion with him. The community has provided a lot of funds for the support of the high school, and so how many times can you go to the well? And I think that's a legitimate kind of concern. Yes, and if nothing else, I would like to see us come up with some sort of a consistent policy where, where facilities are funded DC 90%, where's the other 10% coming from? And do we have a common policy? Because if we go back to pavilions such as Grenfell and Minising and all that, they weren't in any probably long-term plan at the time, and that was just a desire of the community. And that's why they paid 50%, because there was no kind of plans, there's no DCs. So the world has changes, and our DC kind of study is kind of correcting those things. So I think we're in transition, so I don't want to compare this to Midhurst. One of the reasons I don't is because the Midhurst Pavilion was not on any plan. It was something that was brought up, and thank goodness this council supported it, which I think was very, very positive. So I think it's an anomaly also. And I guess I could argue at that time, well, since Grenfell and Minising pay 50%, why doesn't Midhurst have to pay 50%? Well, because there were some DC funds for outdoor rec and that available. So I'm willing to support it if, if it's based on the hydro fund. Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think the point's very well taken. I think some of this stuff is legacy stuff that's happened in the past, and if we go back to actually not that I want to go back, but item 9.4 on tonight's agenda with classifications of different parks, and so that really, and I think we've had this conversation to some degree, is that really will dictate the amenities, if you will, or the baseline or the minimum service level that each one of those types of park will house, if you will. And again, I think some of this stuff is legacy stuff whereby the communities have been fundraising. In my personal opinion is that these are community facilities that are available for anybody, no different than the fields that you see outside here, no different than the Elmville Arena. People will pay for all of those, whether they use them or not is their choice. This is a community facility or amenity that people can choose if to use it or not. Does that mean that we should be fundraising? In my personal opinion, I don't believe so, but I'm not the one making the final decision. So,
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mayor French. How much are we looking at for, like, if we say, okay, you got to fundraise, what's the total amount there to fundraise? I'm sorry?
Well, it depends. We have two calculations. The discussion we had the night we approved this, it was 10%, which was 30, but now we're talking Midhurst paid half of that, so it would be 15. But I think the easier resolution was suggested by Deputy Mayor Allen, and I'm not sure if it would be supported by the mover and the seconder. You know, why don't we just take that 10% from the hydro fund, which can only be used in Elmville anyway? Yes, follow up?
I'd like to see this move forward, but you know what, they're bringing up logical things, and yes, some fundraising was mentioned. The money's there in the hydro fund for us to move forward and give these people some peace of mind, and come back in regards to that funding amount as to how much we're going to take out of the hydro fund. Do we take the 10% out? Do we take 5% out and let them fundraise the other 5%? And maybe that's a discussion we could have. We move forward with this and seal the deal and let them get started, but we go back and we revisit that with a later date as to how much. Is it the full 10%? Is it 5%? You know, do we take 20,000 out of the hydro fund? That hydro fund to me is like a sacred cow. Like every time we turn around, we were going to it. But you know, if it came to be that we take the full 10, so be it. We voted on it, we move forward. But either way, the money's there. And they did say they do some fundraising. So, you know, but we can move forward with this tonight. I think we just need to fine tune that a bit, Mayor French.
Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you, Mayor French. I'd like to amend the motion. Propose an amendment.
And maybe while we're doing that, Director Schmidt, do you have any,
friendly.
what is left in the Elmville Hydro Fund? And we know it has to be for Elmville specific, and I think we agreed that the splash pad would qualify as under the funding model, because remember we reviewed the conditions that it could be used for, and it seemed to fit in community interest and that type of thing. But, so what is the balance right now? Because it can only be used for things in Elmville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I believe the balance is approximately 400,000.
It's up to council, but I would suggest to clean this up. There's two things. My suggestion, again, the mover of the amendment, and that the 10% comes from the hydro fund, and it's done with. And quite honestly, if something else comes along, that wasn't my understanding, but at the same time, I will support that because that money can only be used in Elmville, it can't be used anywhere else. And so we want to set it on it forever so that we can move it forward. So I would definitely support that. Councillor Cosgrove.
Thank you, Mayor French. So does that require an amendment, or can we just scratch out hydro?
That's why we have a clerk. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. I'd like to propose an amendment that 90% be funded from DCs and 10% be funded from the Elmville Hydro Fund.
Is that the correct terminology, Director Schmidt?
The Elmville Hydro Reserve Fund.
Mayor French?
Yes, Councillor Austin.
As seconder, I agree with that, the amendment.
Director Schmidt, is it called Elmville Hydro Reserve Fund? Has it got Elmville in the word or just Hydro Reserve Fund?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe it is just actually the Hydro Reserve Fund is the way it's named in our continuity schedules.
So finished, I will vote on the amendment, and then we'll go back to the main motion as amended. Okay, so moved by Coghlan and seconded by Osmond that the motion now before council be amended as follows, and we'll add that 10% of the total cost be funded by the Hydro Reserve Fund and 90% from DCs. So is that understood? All those in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. And now we go back to the main motion as amended, which will, oops, I'll just read it, just so everybody's clear, and especially anybody at home, that the report from the Director of Recreation Parks and Properties regarding the Homer and Barrett Park splash pad dated May 2nd, 2018 be received, that the contract for the design, supplying, and construction service for Project 2023-12 Homer and Barrett Park Splash Pad be awarded to Diamond Head Sprinklers, Inc. in the amount of $298,800 plus taxes, and that 10% of the total cost be funded by the Hydro Reserve Fund and 90% from DCs. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And definitely holding you to the July 31st because we did not hold it up, except for maybe a half an hour. Councillor Austin.
Just a small point, Mayor French. As you were reading the motion that we just voted on, you said Diamond Head Sprinklers, Inc. I have in front of me Diamond Head Irrigation, Inc.
We have it corrected here on the motion.
Okay.
I'm told it was corrected on the motion. Okay, moving on to 9.7, something much more exciting, aggregate production tender results. And can I have a mover and a seconder to get this on the table? Austin and Ritchie. The report from the Operations Coordinator dated May 2nd, 2018 regarding the 2018 aggregate production tender results be received, that PW-11-2018 for aggregate production be awarded to Winters Aggregates Limited in the amount of $136,583.10, including HST. Any question on this? Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mayor French. Just a quick question. Is this coming out of our own pit, or is this coming out of their pit and they're doing the crushing?
Director Coleman.
Thank you, Mayor French. Through you to Councillor Ritchie, this is coming out of our pit. They'll move their equipment in and crush and haul from our pit.
Any other questions? All those in favor? Carry. And 9.8, action report, reallocation of capital budget funds. Can I have a mover and a second to get this on the table? Ritchie and Allen? That the report from the Director of Public Works regarding reallocation of capital budget funds dated May 2nd, 2018 be received, that $25,000 in the approved 2018 capital budget be reallocated from road resurfacing projects to the fuel management system. Questions of the Director? Anyone? Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. The $75,000 original estimate was for 2 card lock systems to be upgraded. From what I'm understanding now, we need an additional $25,000, which will only be updating 1. So the price tag, again, we can expect another 75 to 100 in 2019.
Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor French. That is correct. At the time when we were doing the research for the budget last year, we inquired about upgrading our fuel system. The feedback at that time was about $30,000 to $35,000 per yard, and that simply was to upgrade the pumping system. Once we got into the tendering process, the feedback from the bidders was that we should be replacing our underground tanks as well. Unfortunately, that feedback didn't come to us when we inquired about upgrading. So at this point, it looks like to get rid of the tanks and to replace the pumps to create sort of a fuel island would be about $100,000 per yard.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, 9.9, and storm and sanitary sewer cleaning and CCTV inspection tender results. A mover and a second to get this on the table. McConkey and Coughlin. The report from the Operations Coordinator dated May 2nd, 2018 regarding the 2018 storm and sanitary sewer cleaning and CCTV inspection be received, that tender PW-07-2018 for storm and sanitary sewer cleaning and CCTV inspection be awarded to Sewer Technologies, Inc. in the amount of $134,746.85, including HST. Questions of the director on this one? I think this came up in another discussion or another report sometime back about inspecting the sewers. Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Nine point 10, appointment bylaw, Anita Shanks. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Coughlin, Hannah. That the report from the Chief Building Official, Director of Building Services regarding appointment bylaw for a building inspector, Anita Shanks, dated May 2nd, 2018, be received, and that the necessary bylaw be presented to council for consideration for the appointment of Anita Shanks as a building inspector for the Township of Springwater. Any questions on this? We do have our director here. Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Item 911, building bylaw fee schedule, septic reinspection fee schedule. Can I have a mover and a seconder to get this on the table? Allen and Coughlin. The report from the Chief Building Official, Director of Building Services regarding building bylaw fee schedule and septic reinspection fee schedule dated May 2nd, 2018 be received, and that the building bylaw and associated fee schedule be presented for adoption. The septic reinspection fee schedule be presented for adoption. Questions of our director on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Um, 912 action item, appointment of alternate to county council. And you have a report, and so can I have a mover and a seconder so we can discuss this? Hannah and Richie. And I'll just give you the gist of it. We have a couple options here. The report from the clerk regarding appointment of alternate to county council dated May 2nd, 2018 be received, that a bylaw to appoint whomever we'd like to appoint as county alternative for the remainder of the term be brought forward to council for consideration at the May 16, 2018 regular meeting of council, or we have the option the council not appoint a member as county alternative for the remainder of the term. So open for discussion, and I'm sure the clerk can respond to it accordingly and might be able to help fill in some blanks. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Mayor French. Excuse me, I would go with the last suggestion that council not appoint a member of county as an alternate for the remainder of the term. My understanding is there's only a few county meetings left now for the rest of this term. Looking at our deputy mayor and our mayor, they look like in good enough health that they can last through the rest of the term. So rather than debate all this, I would just suggest doing like half of the municipalities have done, and that is just put it off until the next term.
Okay. Any other comments? Again, I did ask the clerk to put it on the agenda because some of the other municipalities that have more sporadic attendance than maybe Deputy Mayor Allen and I, who make a majority of them, or most of them, or 95% of them, they have a little more challenge, and their alternates do fill in frequently. But I just want us to deal with it one way or the other, and so we can tell people, no, we're not having an alternate for the remainder of the term. So any comments or questions further to what Councillor Hannah said? Councillor Austin?
In light of the fact that it doesn't cost us anything to have an alternate appointed, I don't think it hurts us to do so.
Councillor Hannah?
Excuse me, but in correction, the way I read the report, I think it's, if as an alternate attends a meeting, it costs us $296.
No, it's county cost.
Oh, but the county, don't they get their money from the taxpayers in Springwater?
Well, they're going to, valid point. Deputy Mayor Allen.
Through you, Mayor French, I just might add too that there's a ton of catching up to do to be on top of the issues and considerable reading. So I think you need to take that into consideration.
Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you, Mayor French. And in there, I read about the members able to participate, but when it came to voting, can I have clarification on that? The alternate can participate, but the vote.
Yeah, I'll turn to the clerk, because some items they can vote on, others they can't. Maybe you'd like to fill in the blanks?
Yes, thank you. There are certain committees that an alternate won't be able to sit on, depending whether the member that they're replacing is the chair or the co-chair. So it really depends on how they're replacing the alternate at the time. Everything's done by weighted vote, so that's where it would come into consideration. It would be the county clerk that would advise on exactly how the weighted vote were to come into effect for that specific meeting that they would be replacing.
Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. My question was, when I read it, it sounded like an alternate can go to participate and maybe be heard, but not be involved in the voting, which to me just seemed odd, so I wasn't sure.
No, my understanding was that in the committees, that would be the case, but in the council, yes, yeah. So there are like, yes, yeah. So at the council, yes, you would have a voting privilege and comment. Councillor McConkey.
I don't believe that we should appoint an alternate to county council till after the election. I just think that we do have people here running in seats that it could be looked at as an advantage. So I just think it's best to stay away from it right now, and it wouldn't show any conflict for anyone in this council.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, so Hannah, you moved it, so you're suggesting option B, like not to appoint. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Richie, will you support that resolution that's on the floor? Okay. So basically, that the report from the clerk regarding appointment of alternate to county council dated May 2nd, 2018 be received, and that council not appoint a member as county alternate for the remainder of the term. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to information reports. Can I have a mover and a seconder to get this on the table? Alan? Hannah? That the report items 10.2 through to 10.4 be received as information. Any of these you'd like to pull out and comment on? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. And okay, thank you. All right, okay, moving on to verbal reports. We don't have Director Spagnell here, so we won't have any on update on the official plan, economic development. County updates, turn to Deputy Mayor Allen if you'd like to.
Thank you, Mayor French. In the April 24th meeting, we talked about Simcoe Manor feasibility report. There are significant, basically a reconstruction of Simcoe Manor in the southern part of the county that is very aged and falling apart in places, and there is an initiative to look at a formal business plan to basically rebuild that over a period of time. So that was discussed, and that's going to be coming forward to County Council. We received the financial statements for the year ended December 31, 17 for the county. And there was a net operating surplus of $3.2 million. And you'll recall that's after a 1% tax increase rather than a 2% tax increase. And net after capital was 2.8 million surplus. There was a motion to, on a separate report, there was a request by staff to use 1.7 of that 2.8 million to be put into Waste Management Reserve Fund to build up a fund for anticipated drop in revenues from recycling because of what China is doing or no longer taking recycling as much as it did in the past, and therefore there'll be an anticipated price drop for recycling. We debated that, and there was a motion to not allocate that surplus because traditionally we have dealt with the surplus allocations at county in the strategic planning session, which is coming up in June. So, but that's another healthy operating surplus for the Simcoe County, and the Simcoe County continues to be in very good financial shape.
Thank you. So let's turn to municipal updates. Councillor Hanna.
Sorry, but I got to say this. May 7th is my 30th anniversary, and I haven't done anything yet, so I just wanted to share the stress load I have. On May the 12th, which is Saturday night at the Midhurst Community Hall, they're having a thing called a Pie Off, and basically it's a fundraiser for mental health, and there's a couple of ladies whose names I don't remember, but they do some kind of entertainment. I don't know if it's singing or what that part's about, but it's entertainment. It's a pie off. People are bringing pies, I guess, and being judged by some dignitaries, not being myself. And then, of course, as we all know, we got the Soapbox Derby on June the 2nd, which is a Saturday, and we have our Springwater Golf Tournament on July the 11th. And you got to get your tickets soon because they're going fast.
Thank you. Anything else? Councillor Ritchie.
Mayor French, a few weeks ago, or was it last week or the week before, in the news, there was an apartment fire in Barrie. It displaced a pile of people, and it showed some good footages there. And I was wondering if our director of chief building official could maybe just take a note. It'd be interesting to see what the cause of that was and what we can do moving forward down the road to take a look at this, because I'm sure there's other apartments all over the place, maybe similar to that. And it's just good, useful knowledge to know what happened there and what can we do to eliminate that. I just want to bring that to light because there's a lot of people sitting out there displaced. And to me, with the technologies that we have today and the process that you have to go through, it should not have happened. I just want to mention that. Thank you. If that could happen.
I don't want to put you on the spot, Director Ippolito, but is there any general comment or any kind of conversation going on? Because it was quite a dramatic blaze that started in one unit, and why would it spread, so significantly?
Thank you, Mayor French, to Councillor Ritchie. I can tell you I've actually driven by it several times and looked at it personally on my way to and from work. It is very dramatic. My understanding is that it would be fantastic to know what the cause was. However, my understanding is that the structure itself was damaged to the point where that may not be able to be ever determined. However, fortunate though, I think through every case, there is something that you can learn from it. And just seeing some of the damage there, I think I can see myself itself why we have fire separations in certain areas and why things are done today in a certain way. So if there is more highlights that come out of it in terms of what may have caused it or how it could be reduced in terms of spreading as quickly as it did, we will definitely be making note of it, and I'm sure something will be done in the future. It was quite something to see.
Actually, just a question, how old was that structure? It doesn't look that old, but I'm just curious.
Mayor French, I believe from what I heard from the reports, it was the 80s, early 80s.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you, Mayor French. And just on the topic of fire, I wanted to highlight, there was a submission in the paper this week from a family on Orr Lake Road, North Orr Lake Road, thanking the Springwater Fire Services for what they had done for that family. Everyone is out safe, and the firefighters helped remove family heirlooms and whatnot from the house. And thought it was really great that they took the time to put something in the paper to thank the fire services. I know they've been busy between the county museum and this coming up the week after, so just wanted to highlight that. And on a different note, Anton Mills had their annual general meeting, and super excited. It's a whole new group of people stepping in and up to move the community forward and to keep the ball rolling. So I just wanted to thank those volunteers that have taken on those roles, and excited to see what they're going to come up with.
Good. Councillor Hanna.
Thank you. I'd just like to go back to Nick for a second. I understand that building that burned in Barrie was too old to have mandatory sprinkler systems. Do you know if that's correct or not?
Dr. Ippolito.
Mayor French to Councillor Hanna, I heard that as well. It is a 3-story building, and from my understanding, or without getting too much into the size of it and whatnot, there was a report that it did not have sprinklers and it would have needed it today. I don't believe that is actually 100% true. However, I will just kind of clarify, there's a lot more to it than goes in just number of stories, and it's an apartment complex. And it was wood frame construction as well, from what I can see. So I don't know, based on the information, if it would not have, if today's day and age it would have required it. It may have been one that could have been constructed without sprinklers today.
Thank you, because one of the fire service people I was talking to stated that had it had a sprinkler system where the fire started, it probably would have been contained there and the building would have not burnt down, it would have been saved.
100% agree with you.
Any other community? Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mayor French. First of all, Elmvale Maple Syrup Festival on Saturday looked to be quite successful if you just take into account all the people that were there downtown. So that's going to be great for the community in the long run. On Sunday morning, I walked down the main street and I was quite impressed with the fact that there was absolutely no litter. Whoever's in charge of the cleanup afterwards should be highly commended. Council might also remember that several months ago we approved a community improvement plan grant to install new windows in that small shop that is sort of right next to the community hall. Those windows are in now, and they have made a significant improvement on that particular building, which the owners are still trying to fix up and then put it on the market as a commercial building. Next Wednesday, a week from today, is EDHS Day. Elmvale deserves help from students, and so the students are going to be going out into the community doing a variety of tasks to help out. And finally, planner Chris Russell, thank you, gave me a note recently that the Rogers cell tower might soon start building it in over near the 10th, I guess is where they plan to build it. So it's been a while since they decided they were going to do it, and it might be happening pretty soon. So the Rogers cell tower.
Councillor Ritchie.
Mayor French, Councillor Austin just touched on something, and I just want to follow up. Last week, leading up to the Maple Syrup Festival, our public works staff was out and about with the sweepers cleaning, and just want to compliment them on the great job that they did. The Elmville Maple Syrup Festival is the largest one-day event of its kind in Ontario. And there's people there from Huntsville, Pefferlaw, because, you know, I make a point of asking people, you know, you see their sign. Huntsville, Mildmay, Pefferlaw, all over the place. And they went out of the way, and they do that every year, and I want to compliment them on that and how good our town looked. I thought they did a great job. Thank you.
And when it comes to the kind of Elmville Maple Syrup Festival, Springwater was well represented as runner-up in the log sawing. And how much did you? What was the margin?
Well, let me clarify that. My trusty sawing partner happens to be in the audience there. He's my brother-in-law. And we were sawing, and we defeated other county councillors to be in first place. But then the defending champion from last year and another co-councillor were sawing a log. And they were behind our time, and the handle came off the saw. So they were able to go through another cut of the saw, having been quite used to the saw on the log, and it beat us by 2 seconds. So I'm sure if Rob and I had been able to get up there and try it one after the other, we could have at least lopped off 5 to 8 seconds and brought victory home for Springwater. But stay tuned for next year, because we're already practicing.
Anyway, we were well represented, and so that's good.
Thank you for asking.
Yes, and you know, it's interesting. Usually, when the tools break, you lose. I can recall that from my drag racing days when I blew the engine up. I didn't get to do it again. But anyway, it was fun, and lots of participation from around the county, and I think that's real important. And as Councillor Ritchie said, you know, it is the largest one-day event of its kind. And maybe Director Belcourt knows the answer to this. Because it was cold in that, but we certainly noticed that the traffic was very good at our Taffy station at the Gateway Park, and it was lined up much like last year. And apparently, we served more this year than last year, like over 2,000 or something, or last year around 13, 15. Do you have those rough numbers there, Director Belcourt?
Thank you, Worship. Unfortunately, I do not have a comparison to previous years.
Sorry. No, you should never ask a question unless you know what the answer is. But it was significantly more, which kind of surprised me because of the temperature in that. But they went through gallons of syrup and I think about 30 or 40% more sticks. So obviously it's well received, and we had a lot of good chats with kind of people from the area. So that was great. So any other municipal updates? Okay, moving on to notices of motion. Is there any notices of motion tonight? Okay. And items for future consideration. Councillor McConkey.
This is something, and I just want to talk about it. I have an area in a subdivision where the sidewalk is smaller than what our sidewalk blade is. And I don't believe it's a natural, and Heather's here, and she can correct me, but say the sidewalk is 4 feet and our blades are 5 feet. So I'm getting quite a few complaints about the blade. And it's not all the time, but there are certain times where the blade is making more damage than others. So I know we've put new sidewalks in other areas. I don't know how many areas we have the 4-foot sidewalk. But if it's just in this one subdivision, I just caution council that it might be nice to replace that subdivision. It's probably, I don't believe it's in the budget and that for going forward. But, you know, when you buy, if you don't have the tools to do the proper job, then make it the same as the rest of the council and as the rest of the municipality. So I'd just like to know from staff, maybe like have a little report if this is the only one, or if there's more that I think we need to know how many we could get calls from and it's going to cause issues with.
Director Coleman, do you have any comment on that? Obviously, we probably have some older sidewalks and different widths and that. does our sidewalk equipment, and I guess Director Belcourt could assist in that, do we have different width blades to service different areas and different sidewalks, or is it trying to use common equipment?
Thank you, Mayor French. Previous standards were a 4-foot sidewalk, 1.2 meter sidewalk. Our current standard is 1.5 meters. As a guess, I would say we have 4-foot sidewalks throughout the township. I know we have some in Phelpston and in Hillsdale. There's probably, the older sections of Elmvale would be 4-foot. And then this particular subdivision in Midhurst was built with 4 feet. The blade is 5 feet. We do not very often use the blade whether it's a 4-foot or a 5-foot sidewalk, it does do damage. It's not an ideal use. We used it on April the 15th and 16th when we had that wet, heavy snow. It couldn't be, as anyone with a snow blower will attest to it, couldn't be moved with a snow blower. So that's when we used the blade. This particular area as well, the residents look after their lawns very well. And what's happened is that the lawn has started to encroach on the sidewalk, as well as you probably know, they top dress and they seed every year, so now it's getting higher. So I've requested that our public works staff, when they do repair this area, that they attempt to lower the grade of the surrounding area. That will help the blade to ride over the top of the grass instead of peeling it up.
Yeah, you just made a point. I guess we don't use the blade all the time, we use a blower. Do we also use those brush mechanisms in light snow? And
Yes, that's correct. If there's a light dusting of snow, we can use the brush instead of the blower. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McConkey.
Okay, so it's just been 2 years. Each year I get it in this one area, so it's just informing people that it should be on record that this area is a problem, and these people do maintain their lawns, and now you'll get the call every year.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other items for future consideration? Councillor Hanna.
Staff and council in summer dress after the Labor Day weekend? Or not Labor Day, what is it, 24th of May anyway?
Yes, that is the plan, and as a matter of fact, the clerk I mentioned earlier, she may note it on when she sends out the agenda that summer dress is appropriate after that date. Councillor Austin.
I didn't understand what you were just talking about.
Basically, after kind of typically Victoria Day, throughout the summer when it's somewhat warm, we don't have to wear suits and ties, but dressed appropriately. Yes. Any other items for future consideration? Okay, seeing none. Bylaws. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the bylaws? Coghlan, Hannah. That the bylaws listed here and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? Carried. And confirmatory bylaw, can I have a mover and seconder? Austin and Ritchie. The bylaw 2018-035 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the regular meeting held on May 2nd, 2018, listed herein, be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? Carried. And of course, the adjournment bylaw, can I have a mover and a seconder on that one? No, they can't support the adjournment, want to stay until the... Okay. Coghlan and Hannah. That the regular meeting of the Township of Springboro is now adjourned 8:03 p.m. to meet again in a regular meeting on May 16th, 2018 at 6:30 p.m. in the Council Chambers, Administrative Center, Minising. All those in favor? Carried. Meeting adjourned, and thank you for anyone that may have been at home observing tonight's proceedings.